Good evening, it's Tuesday, 18th of February, and here's what's making news around the world on World News Tonight. Transatlantic rift. European leaders push for role in Ukraine talks as US and Russia sideline them. 500 days on. Israel rally for hostage release amidst uncertainty over ceasefire deal. Heritage revival. Experts work to restore Syria's war-torn sites and rebuild tourism economy.
From Colombo, this is World News Tonight with Amarsha Fernando.
Good evening once again. European leaders are demanding a role in Ukraine peace talks despite Washington and Moscow sidelining them. After emergency talks in Paris, key NATO and EU nations failed to agree on peacekeeping efforts, exposing transatlantic tensions.
An urgent meeting at the Elysee Palace following the United States' shift away from its historic partners. Olaf Scholz from Germany, Poland's Donald Tusk, but also UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and NATO Chief Mark Rutte. The allies showed up in numbers in Paris. Their aim? To come up with a coordinated response to the United States' sudden change of position.
Nice to see you.
Donald Trump's administration appears to be seeking to find a deal alone with Russia to end the war in Ukraine. Speaking over the phone last Wednesday, Trump and Putin agreed to have their teams begin negotiations. On Monday, the UK government spokesman said Keir Starmer expects to meet Donald Trump next week, after saying he'd send British troops to Ukraine if necessary. Last week, the United States Defence Chief suggested that Ukraine should abandon hopes of winning its territory back from Russia and ruled out its ambitions to join NATO. Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, said that he wouldn't recognise an agreement if Ukraine isn't involved in the peace talks.
All 80 people on board a plane which crashed and overturned while landing in Toronto have survived. The Delta Airlines flight from Minneapolis skidded along the runway with one wing on fire, and it came to a halt upside down as firefighters put out the flames.
The plane first took off from Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport and after an 86-minute flight came to rest belly up on the snowy tarmac at Toronto's airport. Audio from air traffic control paints a picture of what arriving fire crews first saw.
Just so you are, there's people outside walking around the aircraft there. Yeah, we've got it. The aircraft is upside down and burning.
Delta said a CRJ-900 aircraft operated by its Endeavour Air subsidiary was involved in a single aircraft accident with 76 passengers and 4 crew aboard. The CRJ-900 jet is made by Canada's Bombardier and powered by GE Aerospace engines. Canada says it would investigate the cause of the crash, which is not yet known. The incident came amid windy weather following a snowstorm. The airport had said earlier on Monday it was dealing with high winds and frigid temperatures. However, on Monday evening, Toronto Pearson Fire Chief Todd Aiken had this to say about runway conditions. The crash in Canada follows other recent air travel incidents in North America. In late January, at least 7 people died when a medical transport plane crashed in Philadelphia. And days before that, an Army helicopter collided with a passenger jet in Washington, D.C., killing 67 people.
President Xi Jinping held a rare, highly choreographed meeting yesterday with some of the biggest names in China's technology sector, including Alibaba founder Jack Ma, in what analysts saw as a show of support to rally private companies.
President Xi Jinping held a rare meeting with some of the biggest names in China's tech sector Monday. It marked a turnaround in Beijing's approach to its tech giants after a regulatory clampdown 4 years ago. The likes of Alibaba founder Jack Ma and DeepSeek's Liang Wenfeng were present at the highly choreographed event. Analysts said it was a show of support to rally private companies. The first images from Chinese state media showed Xi speaking to executives aligned in rows before him.
We hope that all private enterprises and private entrepreneurs will have the ambition to serve the country, strive for development, operate in accordance with the law, and promote common prosperity so as to make new and greater contributions to promoting Chinese-style modernization.
Investors raced to see who was in and out among top business leaders. Images showed bosses from Huawei and electric vehicle giant BYD sat directly in front of Xi. Leaders from Chinese giants including Xiaomi, Meituan and Tencent were also reportedly present. Shares of Baidu dropped more than 8% after no top executive was spotted. Two sources said the founders of Baidu and ByteDance were among those who did not attend. Jack Ma's attendance was notable. The once high-profile entrepreneur largely withdrew from public life after the IPO of his fintech company Ant was stopped by authorities 5 years ago. That move was triggered by a speech he gave the same year criticising China's regulatory system. Analysts said Xi's move to gather business leaders underscores the new importance of private sector innovation for China to gain ground in technology. US tariffs have recently threatened more pressure on the world's second largest economy. The country has struggled with weak domestic consumption and a debt crisis in the property sector.
Staying in the region, China urged the United States to correct its mistakes after the US State Department removed previous wordings on its website about not supporting Taiwan's independence, which it said was a part of a routine update.
The fact sheet on Taiwan, updated last week, retains Washington's opposition to unilateral change from either Taiwan or from China. But, as well as dropping the phrase, "we do not support Taiwan independence," the page added a reference to Taiwan's cooperation with the Pentagon Technology and Semiconductor Project. It also said the US will support Taiwan's membership in international organisations, quote, where applicable. Beijing regularly denounces any international recognition of Taiwan or contact between Taiwanese and foreign officials. The website update came roughly 3 weeks after US President Donald Trump was sworn in to his second term in the White House. And one analyst said this reflects a shift in the Trump-era priorities. The US, like most countries, has no formal diplomatic ties with Taiwan, but is its strongest international backer. Taiwan's government rejects Beijing's sovereignty claims, saying that only the island's people can decide their future.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. And welcome back. At least 9 people have died after harsh winter weather struck the United States, including 8 people in Kentucky as a result of heavy rains. The state's governor Andy Beshear said hundreds of people stranded by flooding had to be rescued.
Tonight, historic and deadly flash floods slamming the South.
We have lots of roads that are closed due to flooding.
At least 8 dead in Kentucky, fears that number could go up. More than 1,000 rescues, crews racing to save people stranded in rising waters. You can see the scope of the damage in communities across the state. Entire neighborhoods wiped out and underwater. The governor today declaring a disaster emergency. Power out to hundreds of thousands across the region. The devastation hitting Tennessee, a catastrophic situation unfolding in the northwest part of the state after floodwaters overwhelmed the levee pouring into this community. Rescue crews rushing resources to the area. Neighborhoods from Tennessee to Virginia underwater. Some places getting nearly 8 inches of rain since just yesterday. And it wasn't just the floods. 4 confirmed tornadoes across the South, too. A different story, though, in Atlanta, where wind gusts got up to 70 miles an hour, a tree there falling and killing a man in his home. In northwest Alabama, a massive cleanup is underway after gusts tore through buildings and power lines. Back in Kentucky, officials already bracing for the next threat.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh ahead of expected talks with the Russian delegation. While diplomacy was on the agenda, discussions were dominated by the ongoing Israeli-Hamas war, with both leaders reaffirming their commitments to the Gaza ceasefire and the release of all hostages.
It's the second stop on Marco Rubio's maiden Middle East tour after Israel. The US Secretary of State was welcomed by the Saudi Crown Prince in Riyadh, which will host a meeting on Tuesday between 3 American envoys and a Russian delegation. The talks come in the wake of the telephone call last Wednesday between US President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. The two leaders agreed to end the war in Ukraine, raising fears that Europe would be sidelined. a fear seemingly confirmed by the Russian foreign minister before leaving for Saudi Arabia. Also not invited to this meeting is Ukraine, despite the fact that its president is in the region. Arriving in the United Arab Emirates on Sunday, Volodymyr Zelensky stressed that Ukraine cannot recognize any US-Russian agreement reached without it.
Marking 500 days since the October 7th Hamas attack, thousands of Israelis took to the streets in demonstrations, marches and displays across the country. Protesters called for the release of hostages still held in Gaza as fears grow that the next phase of the ceasefire deal may not be implemented.
Demonstrations and rallies are being held across Israel today as the country marks 500 days since Hamas launched its deadly attacks on October 7th, 2023. Some protesters blocking a busy road in Tel Aviv demanding the return of all the hostages still held by the militant group. Over the weekend, Hamas released 3 more Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. 33 hostages are meant to be released during the first phase of the ceasefire agreement, and as of Saturday, 24 have been freed. On Face the Nation, Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke about efforts to free the remaining hostages.
Israel is pulling its forces out of southern Lebanon as the deadline for their withdrawal under a fragile ceasefire deal has passed. The Israeli military continued a pullback today morning for the second day.
Here in southern Lebanon, near the border with Israel, residents eagerly wait to return home after months of displacement. But the timing of their homecoming is not yet guaranteed. The US-France broker deal in late November required Israel to withdraw from southern Lebanon and the removal of Hezbollah fighters and weaponry from there too. But despite pushback from Beirut, Israeli forces are poised to miss its Tuesday withdrawal deadline for the second time, with the IDF confirming it would remain in 5 strategic points in southern Lebanon. It said the decision was taken so it can continue to defend its residents and ensure no immediate threat, and comes as Israel has continued to carry out strikes on Lebanon, with the military saying it's found and killed a Hamas commander. Lebanon's president has said it won't accept a single Israeli remaining on Lebanese territory and that it's working diplomatically to achieve a full withdrawal. Over 100,000 people remain internally displaced in Lebanon, according to the UN's migration agency.
Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has criticized the US approach to the Ukrainian war, saying Washington is trying to please Moscow following a major policy shift under President Donald Trump.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has strongly criticized recent US statements on the Ukraine war, accusing Washington of trying to please Russian President Vladimir Putin with conciliatory remarks. Speaking in an interview recorded in Munich, Zelensky reacted to President Donald Trump's surprise announcement that he had held a direct conversation with Putin about quickly ending the war. Zelensky dismissed the idea of a simple ceasefire, warning that just a ceasefire is not a win, and stressed that Ukraine's future is at stake. Meanwhile, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth appeared to rule out Ukraine joining NATO or retaking the territory lost since 2014, raising further concerns in Kyiv. Zelensky made it clear Ukraine will not sign a deal just for applause, as tensions continue to mount over the direction of US policy on the war.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. And welcome back. A bronze by French sculptor Camille Claudel, thought to evoke her separation with fellow artist and lover Auguste Rodin, was auctioned off in France for more than $3 million.
To every intricate detail before them, onlookers stare in surprise and admiration.
I tell myself that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that I'll probably never see it again, but I'm very happy to see it, so I'm a little moved.
Listen, it's magnificent. A little too big to fit in my house, but it's an extraordinary work.
L'âge mûr, which translates to the mature age, is a famous work by Camille Claudel. It has been missing since 1908 and was found last September by an auctioneer during an appraisal of a Paris apartment. The owner had hidden it 15 years ago. A signature accompanied by the number 1, as this bronze is the first in a series of 6. Another is displayed at the Musée Camille Claudel just outside of Paris. Her work was long overlooked. A student and lover of August Rodin, she spent 30 years in a psychiatric hospital. Only later did people begin to recognise her genius. Claudel's works are still rare today.
Experts are returning to Syria's war-ravaged heritage sites, hoping to lay the groundwork for restoring them and reviving tourism, which they say could provide a much-needed boost to the country's decimated economy after nearly 14 years of war.
It was once dubbed the Bride of the Desert. With its majestic ruins dating back 2,000 years, Palmyra used to be a major draw for tourists. Now it's marked by smashed columns and damaged temples, after years of civil war took its toll on an archaeological treasure. Now, experts like Ayman Nabu have come back to the site and are laying the groundwork to welcome tourists again. Palmyra is one of Syria's 6 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. But when Islamic State group militants came, they destroyed 2 of the site's historic temples, viewing them as monuments to idolatry. Documents and artifacts are also missing from the museum, and in the underground tombs, Islamic verses have been scribbled on the walls. Before the Syrian uprising escalated into a bloody civil war more than 10 years ago, it used to attract 150,000 visitors per month. But researchers will have their work cut out if they are to restore Palmyra to its former glory.
Meet Scrim the dog, New Orleans' famous escape artist who has captured hearts and minds of the community with his daring antics and adventurous spirit. Stay with us to learn more about the four-legged Houdini.
This little guy might as well be called Mischief, but his actual name is Scrim, a tiny pup finally safe with Zeus's Rescue's founder Michelle Cherami after an adventure that had Scrim on the lam in New Orleans twice in the past year. Scrim's most recent escape, busting out a second-story screen window in November, then slipping out of the gate, all of it captured on camera.
That's absolutely Scrim.
Michelle putting out an all-call for help online.
No, Scrim, no.
That's when Scrim went viral. People online tracking Scrim's location on a map, reporting sightings on doorbell and wildlife cams.
That's him.
Scrim even surviving this winter's big Louisiana snowstorm. From signs to statues, the pup's time on the run bringing this city together.
Oh my God, it's Scrim.
But they still couldn't catch him until last week when Michelle finally got something she'd been praying for. A text reading, "Caught Scrim," a reminder of the power of community and strength for a city that has seen so much.
Well, that's a wrap from all of us on World News Tonight. Up next, Anuradha Vikramasinghe is standing by for the nightly business report. I'm Amasha Fernando, and we are going to leave you with the visuals of the Dubai Food Festival that is offering a culinary experience of flavors. Thank you for watching and have a good night.